Good morning. Welcome to News Center Maine's Political Brew. Glad you could be with us, along with former state senator and Yarmouth town councilor, Republican Phil Harriman, and longtime Democratic activist Betsy Sweet. It is so good to see you both in person after 2 years of remote.
It's
I'm
awesome.
just got to get that out there. Let's begin. Senator Susan Collins says she will vote to confirm Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the U.S. Supreme Court. She calls the Supreme Court confirmation process broken and a danger to the country by eroding public confidence in the court. Now, some other Republicans have issued statements that Judge Jackson is clearly qualified to serve, but they're going to vote no anyway. Betsy, it wasn't too long ago we could have a conservative like Antonin Scalia or a liberal like Ruth Bader Ginsburg confirmed unanimously or nearly unanimously because they were there to advise and consent. What do you make of what Senator Collins says about this process?
Well, I agree with her. I think that it is a very broken process, and I think what we witnessed was watching people on that Judiciary Committee using it as a political place, a place to try out messages for the 22 and 24 election season that had nothing to do with Judge Jackson. And I think it has moved the court into a political body instead of being the third branch of government. And so what I wish Susan Collins would do, in addition to vote for Jackson, which I'm thrilled she's doing, is to call out her colleagues. To call out Ted Cruz when he holds up a children's book, and to use those tropes. And I think she has that kind of stateswomanly position, and I wish she would do that.
And Phil, both sides may be guilty in different cycles of perhaps abusing this process, but is there a way to fix it? I mean, from where we are now?
Well, there is. It's not that the process is broken in my view, it's the people in the process are broken. They've become more interested in their partisan positions and their re-elections than they are on what's good for America. And to your earlier point, when the President of the United States nominated a Supreme Court justice, the Senate typically was almost unanimous in approving them unless there was some egregious reason that came to light.
Well, they didn't even start doing confirmation hearings until, in the 50s, well, the first Jewish appointee, but then they'd stopped and it was like the 50s or 60s.
Yeah.
So it's really become quite a different thing.
Yeah. All right, we'll see if anybody can turn the temperature down, but I don't have high hopes at this point. Turning to Augusta, Maine lawmakers want to double the cost of vehicle inspections to start paying for conversion to an electronic system for inspections. Governor Mills is expected to veto this if it reaches her desk. Phil, we're talking about an increase of $12.50 a year for most Mainers. Is arguing over this more political season symbolism than substance here?
Well, I think it's, to me at least, it's the fact that a small group of people on a working group who perhaps had a little bit more of a vested interest in the outcome came to the conclusion that the consumer should pay 50% more than they're currently paying to have their vehicle inspected. This is the wrong time in the economy for the government to saying, we got to tax you even more.
Okay, but we're talking about $12.50. And I think one of the things that's bad, it's true with the gas tax and electric vehicles and the way we do things. We've got to pay attention to the fact that things are changing. And if we just stay, this is the way it's always been, the way we move around this country, the way we move around the state has changed. And so, I mean, it's hard to say that $12.50 is a tax, and I think vetoing it, again, with a bunch of people, I don't know if they're vested interest, but what needs to happen going forward to say that this is a big thing, but she knows, the governor knows it will be made a huge thing. Like this is taxed this is a fee that everyone pays, and it'll be made a huge thing of it. So it doesn't matter whether it's good for us or not.
Senator Bill Diamond's one of the backers of this,
right.
And he says it's the right move, but it's the wrong time to do it.
Well,
and apparently that's where we're going with this. Back in Washington, President Biden's job approval rating has fallen to the lowest level of his presidency in the latest NBC News poll, 55% disapproval overall. Inflation, of course, is playing a big part in that, in part to try to tame high gas prices. President Biden is releasing 1 million barrels of oil a day for the next 6 months from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to offset the loss of Russian crude from world markets. Betsy, first, will this help prices? But second, will it help Joe Biden and the numbers that he just can't seem to boost at all?
Yeah, it's sort of fascinating. I don't think it's going to help prices because I think what's not ever talked about is the gouging that the oil companies are doing, right? So the minute there was a Russian boycott announced, the next day the prices went like that. And that oil is not in the pipeline yet. So I think we haven't talked about that. But I also think in the Biden approval rating, it's fascinating because if you look at the polls carefully, the issues that he is talking about, the issues that he stands for, whether it's Ukraine or climate or paid leave, are agreed to by the vast majority of people in this country, right? So it's really a personality, it's really like the deliverer thing. And maybe it's sort of like the Supreme Court, we can't come away from that. But I think it's really important to notice that the issues that he's talking about are very popular, but he himself can't hold on to that. They don't stick to him.
Bill?
It just seems to me, I think that Betsy's right, the impact on energy prices is not going to be that significant. I'm concerned that we're going to reduce our strategic reserve, and if we need to call upon it, we may be in a weaker position. But to the other point of his popularity, I think the decline began on day 2 of his administration. He was not as extreme as Bernie Sanders, and he was not like Donald Trump. He was the guy in the middle who knows how to get things done, and he shuts down the pipeline. He opens up the border. We have a crisis of our fiscal markets. Inflation is running wild, and I think those added together are why his popularity is so low.
The president released a budget this week that includes a billionaire's minimum income tax, and here's how he describes the motivation. He says a firefighter and a teacher pay more than double the tax rate that a billionaire pays. That's not right, or it's not fair. Supporters say this is a good way to broaden the tax base, but Phil, you know dollars and cents. Is it a good plan?
Well, I would say no. If you look at the facts, the IRS says that 1% of the taxpayers, upper limits, pay 40% of the income taxes. And if the billionaires are getting a break, it's not because of the billionaires, it's because of the politicians who create these laws and regulations that afford them this opportunity. Simplify the tax code. Everybody should pay a percentage of their income and make it easier for us to run our economy.
Betsy?
Oh my God, it's absolutely the right thing to do. I mean, exactly that. To have teachers and working families, have to pay more, not just in percentage, but in actual dollars, than maybe not all, but very many of these billionaires. And there's a new word now, a centibillionaire, someone who's worth $100 billion. They could pay for all of student debt. They could get rid of all the hunger in America and still be multi-billionaires, right? So there has got to be, people have to pay their fair share. They just have to, and they haven't. And you're exactly right, Phil. The politicians have given them the breaks because they're the ones who fund campaigns. Right. So that's where the problem is. But absolutely, we need to do this.
A very unusual and sad story this past week. Eliot Cutler, a man who came close to being elected governor of Maine in 2010, has been arrested on child pornography charges. Within hours of his arrest, the Maine Republican Party issued a statement demanding that politicians return any campaign contributions they received from Cutler. So elected officials, including Governor Janet Mills, Senator Angus King, and Congressman Jared Golden, have all said they have or will make contributions to charities instead of returning cash to Cutler. Phil, should this be a political issue?
No, it shouldn't be. And I have confidence that the people who did receive contributions from Mr. Cutler would return them to a charity anyway. The Republican Party didn't need to make hay out of it, but we're talking about it, so the viewers of Political Brew now know that these politicians are going to give the money to charity.
Yeah.
Were you surprised someone tries to make political hay out of this?
No, unfortunately. I wish that we didn't make political hay out of this stuff, which is a tragedy for the people involved, certainly for his family, but also for the young people, young women, and the industry that provides that kind of stuff. So I wish it wasn't political, but.
Well, let's talk about why this matters on a political broadcast, in that Eliot Cutler was a significant political figure in Maine for the last 20 years or so. How do you see his role in politics?
Well, he only lost by 2% the first time around? Yeah, and in 2010, and I think, having the third party candidate is the reason that we got Paul LePage. And so I think his impact was huge. And so I think it's really hard for people to, I think it's important for people to really pay attention. And I think the other thing is that to look at how widespread this issue is, and it doesn't, we think we can pigeonhole who does this kind of thing. And we know that it happens way more than we would like to admit. Now,
Phil, some Republicans would argue that Libby Mitchell was the spoiler in that 2010 race, but that's another discussion for another day. But there's no doubt that Eliot Cutler played a part in Maine politics.
Oh, going back decades, back to the Carter administration, Senator Muskie, even after he ran for governor twice and was not successful, he was very influential, or at least tried to be, in the University of Maine system, preparing students for the economy of the future. And today it's all just going to be erased.
Shocking fall from grace. When a federal judge ruled in favor of the January 6th committee's request to get some more documents, he suggested this past week that former President Trump may have committed a crime by trying to overturn the presidential election. U.S. District Court Judge David Carter wrote, based on the evidence, the court finds it more likely than not that President Trump corruptly attempted to obstruct the joint session of Congress on January 6, 2021. Betsy, what happens next here? It is one man's opinion, of course, but to have a federal judge go on record this way is pretty striking.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And I think it's important that the Congress and that any legal challenge or any legal investigations that are happening should keep going. I think that we can't stop back. And I think sometimes we want to just sort of say, oh, well, that was yesterday's news. Let's not worry about that. But I think it's, when there's a federal judge who thinks that a president committed a serious crime, I think we have to keep going. I think the AG's office should stay involved and maybe up the ante. And I think everybody else who's doing investigations has to keep at it.
In fact, there's been no evidence that Attorney General Merrick Garland has any interest in pursuing President Trump personally. What do you think?
I think it doesn't matter what party you are. This is about our country, our Constitution, the way our society has been built over 225 years. And if he committed a crime, he should be prosecuted. Shouldn't matter who you are or what party you're affiliated with.
At the start of construction for a new homeless shelter and services center in Portland, Mayor Kate Snyder urged other communities to step up and do their part to help people experiencing homelessness. Phil, is there more that the state can do to make sure all communities in Maine are meeting this need, which just keeps growing?
Yeah, and I think Betsy will agree with me on this. This is not about homelessness as much as it is about addiction and mental health issues. And that's where the state keeps talking about how they're going to put more resources into these areas. That's the root cause, in my view, of why people are homeless. That we've got to serve them in the areas where they can make a difference in themselves.
And as the biggest city, of course, Portland will always sort of be the magnet for services, but Maine's a big state.
Right, and I think there are other cities, Lewiston, Bangor, I mean, the cities are the service centers, right? So that's where people are forced to go. I think most people would rather not do that. They would not rather be in crowded shelters, but I think Phil is absolutely right. We have to.
Did you hear that?
I did. On this one thing.
But I think we'll record that. Yeah.
But I think that we have to look at what causes homelessness, and then I think there's some legislation about even things like zoning in local communities and stuff that has to change. Again, sort of like the cars, we have to start changing with the times, and we have to look at why people are homeless, and everybody has a part to play in that. And the state has shirked its duties, not just in the last 10 years, but in the last 20 years around mental health and substance use disorder.
Let's wrap up with our winners and losers in politics this week. Phil, we'll start with you.
The losers this week is those who propose to raise the inspection fee by 50%. This is not the time to do that. The winners this week are actually, I'm going to do a twofer. One is that the airline industry has come together to call upon the regulators to let us fly without masks. And we're the winners because we get to meet in person again for the first time in 2 years. Good to see you,
unanimous,
Pat.
right?
I agree with
Betsy?
that. I agree with that winner. To me, the loser is the new military budget that's been proposed. That's $31 billion more than last year when they got more than they asked for. And I think we are learning certainly more than ever of what is useful and what's not. And I think that goes more to defense contractors. And that money could pay for mental health, for substance use disorder, for homelessness. So I think that's the big loser in my book. And the winner is a story that you guys covered of the vision for an equitable Maine. When the pandemic, when we looked at it and said we didn't want to go back to when exposed all the cracks, and what's happening in our society and happening in Maine, this 60 groups came together and said, here's how we could have a more equitable, just Maine. They came together this week and announced what they were doing. Check them out, Vision for Equitable Maine.
Betsy, Phil, thank you so much. Thank you for being with us as well. We'll see you next time. News Center Maine is back after this.